Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar today. This is a sort of a bonus webinar following on from our series earlier this year on advancing strategic ocean communication. This time it's in collaboration with the Ocean Literacy Coalition. So today we are going to be talking about the Ocean and Society Survey, which is a first of its kind tool for ocean practitioners across the world to understand how people think and feel about the ocean. It's an initiative that's really been driven forward by the ocean literacy research community, but we feel that the data really has a lot to offer ocean communicators. And so that's why we're here today to talk a bit about how we all might be able to use the insights to help drive more impact. I know that we've got a lot of our communications community of practice joining the call, but there are also multiple people signed up to the webinar who've contributed in some way to the development of the survey. So we'd just like to say welcome to you two and really express our gratitude that the data is available for all of these research hungry communicators. So the way that we're going to run it today is that my colleague Jen McClure from COLC, the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, is joining us. Jen's going to talk us through a bit of the genesis of the Ocean and Society Survey, how it was designed, what it covers, and how people can get involved. And then I'll run a section on ideas of how we think the data is useful for communicators. And then we'll have a question and answer session. Just so you know, the meeting is being recorded. We'll make the recording available for people after it's finished. And also captions are enabled at the bottom of the screen if anyone would like to use those. So if we could move slide, Natalie, please, onto the next one. Thank you. So I just wanted to set the scene a bit, explaining why this collaboration between ocean literacy generated data and ocean communication has come about. And so in Barcelona last year, some of you will be aware that we ran a 2-day communication symposium in which we gathered communicators to talk about what was going well, what was going less well in the space. We wrote an insights report off the back of that, showing everything that we heard. And one of the key findings was really the need for more public perception data for communicators, and also a better way of integrating research into communications design. Off the back of the symposium and as part of the ongoing StratComms project, we gathered together 5 expert chapter groups to develop better practice principles. So a sort of standard for communicators to work to make their communications output more effective. Within that, we had a specific group for research and evidence. And this group really championed both a research-driven approach to communication, but also the need for kind of collaborative data sets that showed us how we were moving the needle together. Alongside that, as part of the UN Ocean Decade, there was an expert working group that was co-chaired by Diz Glithero from COLC and also Nicola Bridge from the Ocean Conservation Trust. And this expert working group produced a paper called Restoring Society's Connection to the Ocean. Within this white paper for Challenge 10, communications in particular was identified as a key driver to restore that connection. And one of the key recommendations from that section of the paper was building an open access body of evidence and insight for the ocean communications community. And then the last kind of documented evidence of the need that I'm going to mention is the Rio Statement. And so that's a statement that was issued by the United Nations Ocean Decade Foundations Dialogue that was hosted by the Botacario Foundation last year. And it included strategic communications as an area of action for the first time. So within that area of action, all of the foundations involved in the dialogue name-checked the Ocean and Society survey specifically as a source of data that could make communications more targeted and effective. So all of that is to say that we're really pushing for more data because we're being told that the communicators need this kind of research to design campaigns that work. with the caveat that we also know that gathering this kind of insight isn't always easy within the resources and capacity of individual organisations. And that's why we're really excited to be part of such an inclusive, collaborative approach, where open access sources, exactly like the Ocean and Society survey, can help support the whole community and drive us forward. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Jen, who's going to give us a bit more of a deep dive on the survey. Thank you, Jen.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Nat. Appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here. Super exciting to just be in a room of energy for strategic communications and sort of the collaborative movement that I think we're all setting a foot on. So my name is Jen McCruer. I'm the research manager with the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, which is a catalyst and center for collaboration and research and innovation. And I'm here representing, again, a collaborative effort that has taken place over the past 2 years, which is the Ocean and Society Survey. And it's come about through thought leadership from both researchers in ocean literacy and marine social science, as well as strategic communicators. So I hope you'll find it of interest for your work. The primary reason for the survey was to answer two questions related to how people around the world feel about the ocean, how they think about the ocean, how they experience the ocean, and what the motivations and the enablers and the barriers are that influence people's interests and concerns, as well as their capacity to act for the ocean. Next slide, please, Nat. Thanks. So the focus is on ocean literacy, which for those of you who aren't familiar, is a concept that has its origins in the US from the early 2000s. And at that time, it was a concept that was largely formed for purposes of education and teaching students about the understanding of the ocean's influence on them and their influence on the ocean. And since that time, there's been a lot of evolution of the concept, where over the past decade or so, there's been a recognition that ocean literacy is not just about knowledge, although that's central and a core pillar to the concept. It's also about, it's about access and experience. It's about behaviors and attitudes. It's about awareness of the ocean. And importantly, it's about communication. So lots of different dimensions have been added to sort of beef up the concept and make it applicable to a wide range of ocean relationships and ocean connections. And most recently, as Nat will speak to again later with the Challenge 10 white paper, in the past year, it's been evolved even further to think about the concept of ocean literacy as a societal outcome, whereby people better understand and value and care for the ocean such that they will act for it in sustainable ways. Next slide, please, Nat. Thanks. So the Ocean Society survey sort of came about and was conceptualized based on this sort of the need for a new tool to reflect how ocean literacy has evolved over time. And it's definitely built on the shoulders of giants, some of whom are in this room, I believe, with us today. Whereby there have been, for example, other surveys that have been done focused on students' knowledge of ocean literacy and the concepts and sort of the 7 core principles that were initially conceived. And now we need a tool to be able to assess sort of that outcome perspective. We also were looking for ways to standardize and measure sort of patterns and changes, because how do we know if we're moving the needle of public ocean perceptions or values and attitudes, behavioral intentions? And so we wanted to be able to create a tool that could be used in different contexts, both on regional levels, local levels, as well as national and international levels, to be able to create sort of baseline data that we can start with to be able to track over time to see how we are moving the needle. Are we moving the needle? What do we need to know from people on the ground that are living and experiencing the ocean connections? What do we need to know to be able to do better in our work, whether that's research or campaigns or engagement pathways? And also to address a data gap in the UN Ocean Decade data infrastructure, which is largely focused on ocean science data, so natural science data, which is key and important. But we need also a focus on the human relationship with the ocean, because all the issues that are facing the ocean that we're all focused on and trying to change, they're not science problems, they're people problems. So we need to really better understand what's happening on the grassroots level with people in different communities, whether they're on the coast or inland with local waterways connecting to the ocean. Next slide, please, Nat. So the Ocean Society survey was, as I mentioned, it was a is a co-designed tool with many collaborative partners over the past 2 years. Um, and it's been designed for really the idea of inclusion, of anybody can take this tool and use it. And the data is open access. So people like yourselves as communicators can take it and use it. So it's designed for organizations, nonprofits, governments, businesses, academic partners, community practitioners. And it's been designed as a tool for respondents that are 18 years of age or older, but it has also been designed with a core set of questions, which I'll illuminate in the next slides, but with the consideration that folks have different contexts and different realities, and they may need to add additional questions to suit those contexts. So it's a flexible tool in that way. Next slide, please, Nat. Thanks. As I mentioned, on the shoulders of giants, the Ocean Society survey didn't just pull out of thin air. It was definitely built on very intentional efforts in Canada and in Brazil and in England and Wales, whereby over the past 5 years, different national level ocean literacy surveys have been conducted. And we wanted to take those 3 surveys and assess them and analyze them for a core question set that could be used in the Ocean and Society tool. Next slide, please, Nat. Thanks. So we started a very iterative process, sort of learning by doing, but with the intention of taking those surveys and looking at each one through 4 stages of analysis to really find the best suited questions for an international audience. So we started by looking at the ocean literacy dimensions that I mentioned earlier, some of them, whether it's access and experience or communication or behaviors or attitudes, awareness. All that has come through the efforts of colleagues in the field over the past decade to look at each question and see how they are addressing, if at all, the current 10 set of dimensions that are available. Then we looked at all the questions based on theme, whether that was ocean protection or ocean health, blue economy, governance, important sort of the action and the solution lens. We looked at metrics, each question by metric, to determine whether the questions were scalable. If we chose this question, could it be used in different contexts? Were they sensitive to people being able to interpret them in a similar way? Were they relevant? Would that question be of relevance to someone in Kenya versus someone in Norway versus someone in Brazil? And then just content, looking at the language that was used and how the questions might be interpreted by different audiences and different user groups. So based on that process, over the course of, I'm going to guess here, probably about nine solid months going back and forth and looking at the question sets themselves, we arrived at a core set of, actually it wasn't a core set, an initial set of 64 questions. The next slide, please, Nat. And of those 64 questions, they went out to an international team of examiners and reviewers. And then we put them through a pilot phase in Canada to be able to determine how they were being used and referenced and understood. And then we began to think about sort of how do we want to administer the survey? The idea was there, the concept was there, the need was there. We started the design process, and then the thought went to how do we make this as inclusive as possible for folks that want to use it? So we thought of 2 different routes for administration, one being sort of an independent means whereby anyone can take the tool and use it, and we have it ready-made for you. And then the second one is through facilitated administration, whereby we chose a survey agency that has been super advantageous to be able to run with countries' administration and be able to compile data sets, which I'll share with you in just a moment. And so the process, went again through after the pilot phase through, a process of feedback and changing the questions, making note of where we were hitting the mark and where we weren't. And finally, in January of this year, 2025, we launched the official survey of 20 core questions with 10 contextual questions, demographic questions at the end in Canada. And that has been followed with a great surge of interest between February and May, leading up to the United Nations Ocean Conference in June, with 11 other countries coming on board. And others have continued to show interest and are being administered currently. So the idea is that by 2030, we can have as many countries as possible, as many users as possible applying this survey to be able to generate the data sets that we need, tracking them over time, to be able to see, are we moving the needle? How are we moving the needle? How can it inform folks' work, such as yourselves and those and practitioners on the ground, to be able to do better and to be able to really make practices and efforts very contextualized, and learn from one another's efforts, learn from where people are. So next slide, please. Nat, thank you. So where are we now? As I mentioned, we have 12 countries that have been administered. And then we have 2 more coming on board. Australia and Germany will be administered this fall. And we have an initial analysis started for each country based on a qualitative lens, as well as across countries, looking at a quantitative, sort of more of statistical mindset to see where are there significant differences or similarities in the data. How are we, not that we ever want to compare the countries against one another, but be able to see what the insights are from each country so that we can be able to learn from one another and see what's working in X country, what's not working and why, how can we support sort of better value, understanding, care for the ocean. Next slide, please, Nat. So we'll show you what we have to date, which is what Focal Data affords through their work. And it's called a dashboard. And essentially any country that is administered through Focal Data is given a dashboard based on their results. It's interactive, it's open access. So all of you in the room can go onto this site, go onto the dashboard, and it does take a second to load each one. But you'll see this is like a combined dashboard where all 12 countries to date are here on one page. You can compare the data. You could also look at independent countries if you want to look at just Cyprus's data, or if you want to look at Spain's data or the US data. And you can filter in by the demographic questions and the questions in the survey itself. So if you're just interested in people who are, I can't quite read that so small, whatever Nat's clicking on there. If you're interested in particular, subsets of the population or genders or different education levels, if you're interested in different sort of proximity to the ocean, who are the respondents? And then you can filter to be able to inform your work. You can take that and say, oh, wow, 57% of women aged 35 to 44 feel this way about their concern for the ocean, or are emotional about the ocean in these 3 primary ways. So it's an engaging tool, it's an interactive, it's an informative tool that will continue to be augmented as more countries come on board, and we'll be able to showcase a dashboard for the 2025 years to the 2026 and so forth up until 2030. So you'll be able to return to this to be able to compare over time and use this as the evidence-based insights that are needed more than ever to be able to inform your work and put campaigns and engagement pathways together that are centered on human values and human connections with the ocean. Thanks, Nat. The next slide, please. So the opportunity is for you, as I mentioned, was to use the existing data to inform your work. Please engage and go into the dashboard, have a click around, get a feel for it, see what's there, because there is a lot of information there. Those 20 core questions. I mean, there is a depth there that could keep a campaign running for a year or more. And be able to go in, and if you want particular insights, you can analyze the data to analyze particular questions of interest or angles of interest. And you can also run the survey. If you have a means or you have, partners or a network, that please feel free to share this tool widely. We are looking for more people to come on board and to see the value and to invest in its purpose, and to become a partner among the team that exists and is continuing to grow. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out at any time. I believe my email will be passed around, and if not, you can always go to the dashboard link, which we'll share at the end of this. And please be in touch, and I hope you find it of use to inform your work. And I will pass you on now, I believe, on the next slide, to Nat, just to further discuss sort of its central purpose, or its, how do you take these evidence-based insights that are being provided for you and turn them into impactful strategic communications.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Just before I talk about turning insights into impact, I just want to kind of really reiterate and reinforce Jen's last point. So just because I know we had a question in the chat about it as well. So at the moment, all of the data from the 12 countries where the survey has been administered is open access. So you can go on, you can log on and register, anyone can look at that data. The idea is for us to get data on as many countries as possible by 2030. Hopefully, we'd like to run repeat waves of the survey as well. The administration cost that Jen put on there, which I think was £4,200, is how much it costs to run the survey per country. So if you work in a country where there's currently not data available, that's how much it would cost to gather data in that country. Um, so we are looking for other partners to come on board to gather data from more locations. The other thing that I just want to flag is that we're very aware that at the moment the data is global north heavy. And so if you are someone that's interested in coming on board from a global north country, but you do have resources or capacity within your organization to essentially match fund a global south country to help us kind of generate a more geographically diverse set of data, we'd be very interested to talk about that further as well. So yeah, I'm going to go over. There are many, many ways this data is useful for communicators, as I'm sure everyone watching can begin to think about. I'm just going to go through three sort of principal ways that we think it could be of use. So the first one, Natalie. So establishing baseline metrics, are we moving the dial? And so this, for me, looking at the survey, is one of the most exciting things about it, is it gives us a baseline and a shared starting point. So through this survey, it enables us to say with a pretty good degree of confidence, here's where people are right now in terms of their attitudes, their behaviors, their connections to the ocean. Um, and it's really valuable because it helps us tell a clearer, stronger story together. It helps us tell the story of where we're making progress and where there's still work to do. So we know as communicators that it's often not a one-off campaign or communications effort that really makes the difference, but the cumulative impact over time of multiple communications campaigns, interventions, media stories, different voices. So it makes sense that in order to show how we're moving the dial, it's a shared data set that we can learn from together. And I suppose the other thing that I think that this baseline does is it helps us build trust as we welcome more people into the communications and ocean literacy space. So new voices and practitioners and funders, because it enables us to really point to the evidence with what we're doing. We're showing that it's collective, and it really kind of helps hold our efforts to account. There's a sense of accountability there as well. So in terms of baseline, if we go on to the next slide, as Jen said, there's a core of 20 questions with 10 additional demographic questions, but here are just some example questions that we might want to use over time to track change. So question one is, in your opinion, which of the following environmental topics are of highest priority to address? There's then a list, so you can see where ocean and freshwater systems features in that. In the next 12 months, how willing would you be to change your lifestyle if you knew it would help the ocean? You know, ideally, we want to see that going up. How often do you think about ocean health, and how often do you think about climate change? Just to give an example from the data to bring that to life a bit, I wanted to show you some of the French data. If we go on to the next slide, Natalie. So we partnered with the French organisation Action ahead of the UN Ocean Conference in Nice to collect the nationally representative data from France. And so what this graph does is it shows us how often people in France say they think about ocean health compared to climate change. And what I think is powerful for this is not just that it like the snapshot in time, but its potential to track change over time. So right now you can see that ocean health is less top of mind than climate change. So for example, only 9% of people say they think about ocean health every day compared to 17% for climate change. But a pretty high level, 36%, say they think about the ocean a few times a year. And what that shows to me is that there's really room to grow there. There's space to make ocean issues more visible and relevant in people's daily lives. So if we continue to repeat this survey, in a year, in a few years, what we'd hope to see is whether the combined efforts of communication and ocean literacy and advocacy are shifting those numbers. Are more people thinking about the ocean weekly? Are more people thinking about the ocean daily? Or at the very least, are there fewer people saying they don't think about the ocean ever? And so this is how tracking salience data, for example, would help us. It would give us a benchmark for public awareness and a way to measure how our collective work is making the ocean more present in people's minds and lives. Thanks. If we go on to the next one, so a second way that the data can be used for communicators is insights for campaign development. So what the survey does, what the data from the survey does, is offer an insight into the hearts and minds of our audiences. So it helps us understand what people care about in relation to the ocean, but also where they might be unsure and disconnected. And so this is incredibly helpful for all of us working on campaigns and outreach, because it means we can shape the messages to resonate with audiences, we can connect to what matters to people and inspire them to care more deeply. And I think it's really important also to note that this is a strategic tool for campaign design. So the data can help us spot opportunities and gaps and challenges, those places where we as a community might need to like lean in a little more to make a difference. So it doesn't just support existing campaigns, it really helps identify where future efforts might be most effective. A few example questions that you might want to use to do that. When you think about the ocean, how does it make you feel? When you think about the health of the ocean, how does it make you feel? Where do you mostly learn or get information about the ocean? And that just from a logistical perspective is a really useful one when if you know a particular demographic you're trying to connect with, like where do you need to go? Where do you need to be putting your communication to get in front of them? In the next 12 months, how willing would you be to change your lifestyle if you knew it would help the ocean? And to what extent do you trust each of the following groups to take action to address ocean threats? So I'm going to give two examples of the French data for this. So the first one, I just want to give an example of how the data can be used to help use emotion to create connection and inspire action. So this is the French data again. And so here it's and for me this is like part of the value of the survey. It's not just about what people think and know, it's also about how they feel. So when we asked people in France how they feel when they think about the ocean itself, the dominant emotions that we saw were awe and calm. So nearly half of respondents, you can see there, ranked awe among their top three feelings, and 41% said calm. And so that tells us that both wonder and a sense of peace are really powerful entry points for engagement. We know that in communications, if we want to connect with people, we should start by using emotions that they want to feel so that we start from a positive emotional space. But then if you look at the second graph, what you can see is that when people think about the health of the ocean, that emotional profile really shifts quite dramatically. So concern is by far the leading response, with over half of people ranking it in their top three emotions. And you also can see there are feelings like anger, overwhelm, fear, and even hopelessness there sort of rising to the surface. So what does that tell us as communicators? It shows us that we really need to balance our storytelling. So if we only lean into the fear and despair side of things, it risks overwhelming people and shutting them down. But on the other hand, if we're only talking about awe and beauty, we might not sort of spark the urgency that we need to drive action. And so the communications insight here is really about holding both. So if you look at those two questions together, what it gives you is an emotional map to help you design campaigns. So for example, with the people of France, it's telling us that to engage the public, we should start with a sense of awe or calm offered by the ocean to connect with people, to draw them in, and then acknowledge and validate their concern, their sense of being overwhelmed, and then give them pathways to act. As I said with the other data sets, it's really interesting when you start dividing this and like kind of breaking it down into different demographics. So say, for example, you're in an organization where your main audience is 18 to 25-year-olds in a specific part of the country. You could shape this data, you use the filters to show how those particular people responded, and then you've kind of got your emotional roadmap for that particular audience. And then another one that I wanted to show you was mobilizing different types of audience. So one thing that this data like really reminds us of when you start to drill into it is communications 101, which is you can't treat the general public as one audience. There isn't just one public out there. Different groups of people come to ocean issues with very different feelings and motivations and levels of willingness to act. So again, this is very macro. This is nationally representative, looking at all of the French respondents. And if we take it by the question of willingness to act in the next 12 months, firstly, you can see at the bottom of the graph, you have the people who are most willing. These are our most committed group. They are ocean campaigners, natural allies. If we dig into the data around them, we can see that they're motivated by intergenerational responsibility, a personal sense of duty. If you're running a campaign where you need to mobilize people really quickly, this is your low-hanging fruit. These are the people that campaigns can lean on to lead, to advocate, and to inspire others. So what you can do is you can take this question and then you can do analysis to find out exactly who's there in terms of demographics and how to target them. Then you have this very interesting big chunk in the middle. So that's like nearly half of people, 49%, who said they're fairly willing to act to change their lifestyle if they knew it would help the ocean in the next 12 months. These are people that care, but when you look into the data, many of them feel overwhelmed. They're far more likely to feel overwhelmed than the very willing group. They have a fairly low level of trust in institutions to take action. They're not indifferent, like they talk about having emotional connection to the ocean, but they're very disillusioned. So what you might want to do if you were running a campaign in this group is run a campaign that gives them a sense of agency, to show them evidence of what's being done already, and give them practical steps that they can take. And so what we'd ideally want to see over time is this kind of tranche of fairly willing people move and kind of shift into the very willing sector. And then finally, you have another interesting set of undecided people at 19%. I think 19% of the population is a pretty big group of people who's undecided about whether they would change their lifestyle. But that's quite a big potential audience that we could engage. So this 19%, we'd have to work a bit harder with this group. We know they're quite disengaged. We can see from the data that they're not necessarily emotionally connected to the ocean. But what we can see in this undecided group is that they're more likely than the other groups to be motivated by the idea of doing what's right, doing the right thing. And that's a message that I think we can really work with in campaigns. So again, many ways to cut the data by different audiences. But for me as a campaigner, I kind of feel this way of breaking down the audiences and like understanding what different groups look like is really gold. And it means that we can meet people where they are, whether they're disillusioned or deeply committed, and really create pathways to act and messages that connect with them where they are. And then the final kind of key way that we think the OSS can be useful for communicators is ocean coverage and advocacy. So we know that issue salience is a really big challenge for ocean communication. How do you keep the ocean top of mind for public and decision makers in what is frankly like a very noisy and also very terrifying media environment? How do you keep getting coverage? How do you show politicians and decision makers that this is an issue that people care about? So the findings from the OSS really give us a stronger voice when it comes to advocacy in public conversations. It gives you evidence to show that people care, show that the ocean matters when we're trying to spark action, influence policy, bring new partners on board. Data like this can make headlines more compelling, and it really gives advocates the evidence that they need to speak with confidence. And finally, I think it strengthens our shared efforts. So it really shows that we're not a few isolated voices speaking up for the ocean. It shows from the survey that like the will of the public is behind us. So some example questions for that. Within the survey, there's a set of agree and disagreement scales. So one of them, which is question 14, to what extent do you agree and disagree with the following statements? So 1, ocean protection and climate change should take priority even at the cost of economic growth and jobs. That one has a lot of really interesting results. Next one, countries should work together on ocean protection, even if they disagree on other issues such as trade or security. Again, like a very powerful one that the results we've seen really show the importance and value that people put on multilateral efforts in a time where kind of geopolitically we might feel more fragmented than ever. And then finally, my country should strengthen its commitment to protecting the ocean. So what I'm going to show you with that one isn't the data, it's what we did with it. So as I said, we ran this survey in France just before UNOC, like very much just before UNOC. It was very up to the wire with our data collection. And then what we did was we looked at the data and we saw this quite big disparity between a lot of the French public like really saying that they wanted better protection for the ocean, but very low levels of trust in leaders to do what was needed. We know that around conferences like UNOC, it's a very busy media space, but what our objective was to really showcase public will behind the conference going into it. So we wrote a short press release that just had the top lines of French data, which you can see there. It was 72% of French people consider the ocean to be in crisis, which was another question on the survey, but only 36% trust their leaders to act. So we put out that press release, and you can see there it got coverage in Spanish, English, and French. As I said, it was a very busy media space, but it was really for us kind of quite a powerful demonstration of how to use the OSS to get coverage of what people think at a busy time like that. If we can go on to the next slide, Natalie. I'm going to pass back to Jen on this, just in terms of how to get involved. And then I think we'll open up for a question and answer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nat. Yeah, I hope this has so far left you sort of buzzing and sparking with ideas of how to use the OSS, towards your efforts and maybe in different veins that you didn't envision possible before. It is really exciting, and it's continually sort of burgeoning as a collaborative effort with more partners coming on board, and much more interest being generated. So if you are one of those people, there are various ways to get involved and to contribute to the effort. So if you want to sort of join us, if you are at all interested in ocean literacy research and communication and you wanted to join us by joining our community, if you want to, as Nat spoke very well to at the beginning of her presentation, if you want to facilitate or administer, or if you have ideas of how to administer with countries, please get in touch. We are definitely interested to chat with you and to connect further. And even if you have resources that you think this could be worthwhile, here's a contact I can pass along, but I can't do it myself. Please do share. If you want the access to the current data sets, the QR code at the bottom here leads you to the Ocean Society survey page, which will give you sort of the background that I provided, but also gives you more information on how you can use the OSS. Um, and how you can get in touch with us if you have further questions, and also how you can see the results to date by country. The dashboard page that Nat had up on screen earlier is open access. You just have to sign in with your name and an email address for each dashboard that you access, and that's just for purposes of tracking and monitoring. So please don't be sort of put off by that sort of extra step to get in, because once you get in, I guarantee it'll be fruitful and worthwhile. Um, and if you have any other ideas, if this leaves you bubbling, with ideas today, tomorrow, or a month from now, 6 months from now, please do circle back. This is not just a once-off initiative. This is ongoing. This is, it's continually evolving as we hear from different people and the needs and the interests and the efforts that are happening on the ground. Because the OSS, as important it is one tool among others, but it's also one tool that can't do everything. And we really recognize that we had to settle on 20 core questions to keep it accessible, to keep it inviting, to keep it meaningful. And within those 20 questions, they already do provide just a wealth of information to use. But there are lots of other questions that could have been asked, that need to be asked, that there will be ongoing efforts to sort of include, or to, create a space where we could come together, even in conversation and discussion, as to what the OSS helps with and what it leaves out and what is needed as we continue to grow and put forth this effort, and collaboration up until 2030. So please do get in touch. The QR code will lead you to the page, with various contacts, mine included. So please do let us know if this has sparked something with you today, and ways that we might be able to collaborate going forward.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, just to add at this point, when you when people come off the webinar, you will get a very quick survey from us that I think is 3 questions. And that's just to really help us kind of figure out what the appetite is and where it is. So one thing that we're very aware of is that there might be people who kind of see this, and like Jen said, it's sparked interest, it's sparked appetite, but you might be someone that works for a fairly small organization where there's not someone that has experience of using data within the comms team. And as we're sort of designing the next stage of the strategic communications project, it's really useful for us to know if there are people out there that would like to use the data but don't perhaps know how to do it, so that we can design our future work around the needs of the community. As Jen said, like we're very, very, very flexible in this, like we're very open to conversation. I think our kind of combined desire is really just to see the data making as much impact as possible. So we've got a few questions that have come in. The first one from Fernanda: are you considering to include countries like Global South to participate in the survey? I think I touched a little bit on that, but Jen, do you want to say a bit more on this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. And Nat, I think you spoke well to it. We really want this to be a tool that is used and useful for all countries. Whoever has the interest and the capacity to come on board, or for others to help others to become, to be administered. And as Nat, very accurately mentioned, at the moment we are very Northern Hemisphere heavy in our data sets. And there is definitely a focus going forward in the next, 6 months to a year on sort of balancing that, and having the input and the insights generated from Southern partners. So if you have any contacts or any, information that you can pass along to bolster our efforts, as we're working really hard to make those connections and to raise funding to be able to invite Southern partners to be a part of this, because it wouldn't be, a tool that can be used in global ways if we didn't include everyone. So the intention is certainly there, and we're just trying to find the means. So please do reach out, and let me know if you have other resources.
Thanks, Jen. I guess the other thing just to note on that is the cost that we said at the beginning, that is, and Jen's mentioned this already, but that is if you collect data for that particular country through Focal Data, which is the main platform that we've been using. But there are other ways to administer the survey. So the actual questions themselves are available for everyone to use, and we're looking into like different ways of how the survey can be administered that might be more cost effective in different locations. So again, like all, as Jen said, like all of this is an ongoing conversation. Some of it is like this community learning as we go along as well. And so we're open to finding sort of all sorts of solutions to make sure that anyone that's interested in running the survey is able to do so.
Yeah.
Um, Judy, we would be very interested to see if we can apply the survey in Africa. How different is the survey to the current ocean literacy survey? We would be interested to see if this is one that would work more effectively in the African context.
Excellent. Thanks, Judy, and hi. Lovely to have you with us. Um, I'm assuming that you mean the International Ocean Literacy Survey. It'd be helpful to know to make sure I'm referring to the right one. If so, that was the survey that was designed for use in schools and with students, um, and is still very much so in circulation today and is being applied specifically for those under 18. So this one is 18 years and older. Um, you may also be referring to the survey that was done in South Africa a few years ago. I don't know if I can't quite see the chat to see if you're answering or still here. But if you're referring to that one, then that would be considered similar to the foundations on which the OSS was built. So the Canadian, Brazilian, ocean and whale surveys, and then the South African survey was done. So it is different from both of those. You may find that some questions overlap with the South African national survey that was done. But it is different enough that I think it would provide value, and I would love to have a conversation with you to connect further.
Great, thanks, Jen. The next question is from Shayna. Is there a possibility to partner and add additional questions to the survey, or are the questions fixed?
Great question and fabulous. More partners, the merrier, more welcome. There is definitely a way to contextualize the survey for you. It depends on which route you want to go. If you wanted to go through a facilitated administration with focal data, then there is space for 3 to 5 additional contextual questions that are specific for your region or for your purpose or project. If you decide to go with the independent means, whereby you want to take the survey that, I can provide you with the script and you can run it, the platform's at the ready. You can add as many contextual questions as you wish. So there's different routes to go. I can give for an example that as an independent means of administration, there have been several people that have taken it, whether they're early career professionals or graduate students have used the survey in an independent fashion to be able to apply it to sort of a pre and a post evaluative concept of a program or a campaign. And they've added several different contextual questions at the end for their purpose. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility within it. It's malleable for your interests. More so in the independent, 3 to 5 questions in the facilitated. But yes, please reach out and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, just as an example, another example with the French data in particular that we ran in the run up to UNOC. We added 5 questions to the end of that were just because we were interested in awareness of UNOC as a conference around in among the French public. So we added questions to the end of the survey to kind of make it useful for that as well. Fiona, how large do the country samples need to be? Do we need to be collecting the same sort of responses as in the current data sets for meaningful stats?
Excellent. So with the facilitated administration with focal data, we are looking to achieve, and we do achieve, national representation for each country that's administered. And in that way, all the questions are kept the same so that it's directly comparable, as you'll see on the dashboard. That question per question is directly comparable. If you were to go the independent route for facilitation, we do ask that the core questions do remain the same so that they, even if you don't reach national representation, you're still able to compare it to the wider data set. And we're also still able to, to work with the data that is collected on your end to be able to inform and reinforce, the mutual effort. So, yeah, it depends. There's a group, for example, that's involved with the Mediterranean region, and they're interested in just using it with 30 representatives in each of their country regions. In which case they have 30 folks, but the reason for doing that is that they can then apply the results that come in to directly impact the efficacy of their work and the directions forward, but keeping the core questions the same. They can also draw on each of the region country data that has been collected from a national representative sample, to be able to sort of build on their efforts and to elaborate on the work that they've done. So there are different approaches to take, and it just depends on the route that you want to go, and we can again chat further.
We have a question from Tori. Can the survey or could the survey be administered to young people under the age of 18?
Great question. So at the moment, the answer is no, not in its present form. So the survey has been designed for participants 18 years of age and older for purposes of ethical consideration, as well as sort of the direction that we took with wanting to have consent through focal data panels and to ensure that we have sort of a similar populace of respondents. That said, there is interest and perhaps movement in the coming year to potentially create sort of a second version of the survey that would be for 18 years and younger. So again, feel free to reach out with me with your contact so I have it on hand. So if that comes to fruition, then I can certainly point you in the direction of use. And that said, just to reiterate that the International Ocean Literacy Survey is still in operation for those that are 18 years of age and younger, which is more knowledge focused, but you could also perhaps adapt that for your needs for the time being. Mhm.
Thanks, Jen. And we also have a question from Morella. When are you hoping to repeat the survey, and can groups contribute directly to that?
It's a great question, Marilla. Great to see you. Uh, as we spoke to, and through both sort of the design, the conceptualization, and the use of the survey, it's in an iterative fashion. So where we go from here, the idea is to get as many countries on board as possible, but we are in conversation of having countries that have currently participated, say the 12 or soon to be 14 countries, having a conversation whether it's feasible for those to be repeated, say every year or every second year. That could be sort of the repetitive wave that takes place to lead us to 100 countries, or if we generate enough interest and enthusiasm for the project and we have 100 countries over the next year, then we can have conversations about having that larger sample size repeated up until 2030. So certainly the idea would be to have at least 1 to 2 more data points for each of the countries that are involved, or that come on board, so that we by 20 and 30 we have data sets that we can look across time to see if we're moving the needle, how we're moving the needle, where do we need to go post 2030. But it's still to be determined, so please stay tuned.
Great, thanks. I think that's all of the questions that we've had in for now. Yeah, thank you. Natalie has put in the chat our email addresses. So there's the general Ocean ISU email address that both myself and the other Natalie monitor. So we'll get that if you email that. Or Jen directly at COLC, or email us all together. We love to have these conversations. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I think it just feels like a really exciting movement to be part of, and I know it's been a while in the making, and it's really great to be at a point where we've got data from these 12 countries already, and I feel like the snowball effect is happening and we're just going to get more and more. So thank you so much to everyone who's given us
Yeah.
time to listen. We really hope to hear from you. As I said, you'll get the survey at the end. I'm going to make sure that we close the webinar at 2 minutes too, so you all have the last 2 minutes of the hour to answer our questions. No excuses. And yeah, Jen, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your insight and experience and kind of talking us through what an exciting tool it is.
Thanks, Nat. Thanks to everyone for being here, and thanks for the inclusion. And looking forward to hearing from folks following the webinar. And all the best in your endeavors to put the OSS data to use.
Thanks, everyone.